Israel intensifies Gaza City assault, dozens of Palestinians killed. Charlie Kirk, murder suspect, confesses after emotional plea from parents. Kashmir's apple crisis deepens as high blockade halts harvest. And Malawi begins vote count after high-stakes presidential election. Good afternoon. Welcome to Around the World in 30 Minutes on Politics and Business Television. I'm Fatima Abubakar Oyibo. Many thanks for joining us. Israel's military campaign in Gaza has escalated dramatically, with dozens of Palestinians reportedly killed in a wave of air and ground attacks. The strikes targeted residential areas, including the Shati refugee camp, where a child and his mother were among the casualties. Tanks, jets and naval forces have joined the offensive, flattening homes and forcing thousands to flee amid growing international condemnation. And despite repeated calls for restraint, Israeli forces continue their push into Gaza's largest city, deepening the humanitarian crisis. Entire neighborhoods have been declared no-go zones, and aid agencies warn that displaced families are trapped without food, water or medical care. And the death toll in Gaza since October 2023 has now surpassed 64,000, with tens of thousands more wounded. Global leaders and human rights organizations are urging an immediate ceasefire, warning that the operation could violate international law and worsen regional instability. Meanwhile, Hamas claims Israeli hostages remain in Gaza City, raising fears that the intensified assault could jeopardize their safety. Meanwhile, the European Commission has proposed suspending key trade concessions with Israel in response to its ongoing military operations in Gaza. The move could affect nearly 37% of Israeli exports to the EU, including agricultural goods like dates and nuts, which currently enjoy reduced tariffs under the EU-Israel Association Agreement. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas stated that Israel's actions in Gaza, including the blockade of humanitarian aid and expansion of settlements, violates human rights obligations outlined in the agreement. The Commission also recommended sanctions on far-right Israeli ministers Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, as well as violent settlers and Hamas operatives. While the proposal marks the EU's strongest stance yet, it faces instant resistance from key member states like Germany and Italy, marking its approval uncertain. Nonetheless, the Commission has already frozen £20 million in bilateral support to Israel, excluding aid to civil society and Holocaust memorial efforts. In the meantime, President Donald Trump was treated to an extraordinary display of British pageantry as he arrived in the United Kingdom for his second state visit, an honor no other U.S. president has received. Greeted by Prince William and Princess Catherine at Windsor Castle, Trump and First Lady Melania were escorted to meet King Charles III and Queen Camilla amid a 41-gun salute and a military parade involving over 1,300 personnel. The ceremonial welcome included a horse-drawn carriage procession through the Windsor estate and a joint fly-past of state. Trump, who has long expressed admiration for Britain's royal traditions, described the experience as very special and referred to King Charles as his friend. Behind the grandeur, the visit carries diplomatic weight. Prime Minister Keir Starmer is expected to host Trump for bilateral talks at Chequers, focusing on trade, technology and global security. While protests continue outside the royal bubble, Britain hopes the red carpet treatment will strengthen ties with the unpredictable U.S. leader. On a different front, the man accused of assassinating conservative activist Charlie Kirk has confessed to the killing following an emotional plea from his parents urging him to surrender. Tyler Robinson, who is 22 years, admitted in text message to his partner that he had had enough of Kirk's hatred and left a note stating, and I quote, "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk and I'm going to take it." Robinson was at large for over 30 hours after allegedly shooting Kirk during a student event at Utah Valley University. Prosecutors say he used a bolt-action rifle from a rooftop, exposing others in and a possible death penalty. Utah County Attorney Jeff Gray confirmed that Robinson's confession came after his parents contacted him, pleading for accountability. Robinson later turned himself in and appeared in court via video, showing no emotion as charges were read. The case continues to draw national attention, with tributes pouring in for Kirk and calls for justice mounting. Turning now to Asia, thousands of apple growers in Indian-administered Kashmir are facing devastating losses as the Jammu-Srinagar National Highway remains blocked due to landslides and relentless monsoon rains. With over 4,000 trucks stranded along the road, crates of apples worth millions are rotting in transit, threatening the livelihoods of farmers across the valley. The blockade comes during the peak harvest season, when Kashmir's orchards typically supply nearly 80% of India's apples. Growers say the disruption has turned months of labor into waste, with many forced to discard entire truckloads of spoiled fruit. One distraught farmer says all their hard work for the year is lost while watching his produce collapse under the weight of decay. Authorities have begun constructing a temporary diversion to restore traffic, but traders warn that even a delayed reopening could trigger a market crash. With the region's economy heavily reliant on horticulture, the crisis has sparked urgent calls for infrastructure upgrades and alternative transport routes to prevent future disruptions. In other news, Yulia Navalnaya, widow of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny, says 2 independent laboratories have confirmed that her husband was poisoned before his death in a remote Arctic prison in February 2024. In a video posted online, she revealed that Navalny's biological samples were secretly transferred abroad and tested, with both labs reaching the same conclusion. Alexei was killed. More specifically, he was poisoned. Navalnaya did not disclose the countries or labs involved, but urged them to publish their findings and expose what she called the inconvenient truth. She accused the Kremlin of hiding Navalny's body and obstructing investigations, claiming the regime is trying to erase evidence of state-sponsored murder. Russian officials maintain that Navalny died of natural causes after a walk in prison, a claim dismissed by his allies and family. The new revelations have reignited global outrage, with Western leaders renewing calls for accountability. Navalny's death is widely seen as a crushing blow to Russia's pro-democracy movement. Back to Africa, Malawi has begun counting votes following Tuesday's presidential election held amid the country's worst economic crisis in decades, with inflation soaring above 27%, fuel shortages and widespread poverty affecting over 70% of the population. Voters turned out in long lines early in the day, through turnout later dropped to 51%, down from 64% in 2020. 17 candidates are in the race, but the contest is widely seen as a showdown between incumbent President Lazarus Chakwera and his predecessor Peter Mutharika. Both men have faced allegations of corruption and economic mismanagement, leaving many voters, especially youth, calling for change. Alongside the presidential vote, Malawians also elected members of parliament and local councillors. If no candidate secures more than 50% of the vote, a runoff will be held within 60 days. Provisional results are expected by Thursday, with the nations watching closely for signs of a political and economic turning point. And that wraps up the program. But before we go, the headlines again. Israeli intensifies Gaza City assault, dozens of Palestinians killed. Charlie Kirk murder suspect confesses after emotional plea from parents. Kashmir's apple crisis deepens as highway blockade halts harvest. Malawi begins vote count after high-stakes presidential election. For more updates and in-depth analysis, follow Politics and Business TV English on YouTube and Facebook. Connect with us on Instagram at PNB English and TikTok at PNB.TV.English. Remember to subscribe and stay informed. From me, Fatima Abubakar Oyibo, do have a lovely day and bye for now.